Welcome to the channel Tribe. This episode is a part of our Meetup series. In this episode, we have Lalit Bhamare talking on testing beyond testing.
This talk that I'm presenting today have a little backstory to it. A couple of years ago, I was in New York presenting in Anna's conference, Test Leadership Congress, which is also currently going on. And the topic I presented there was more about whole team quality. At this conference, there were lots of testers, especially from the management role, who were attending it: test engineers, senior test managers, quality directors, directors of engineering. And most of the discussions that were happening around that time, one thing was pretty common in those talks. Rather, there was a question raised about, or concern raised about, evaluation of testers in agile teams. People were confused. Most of them who were responsible for testers' growth as their bosses were not from in testing background, so to say. So they had no idea how they can help testers to grow in their career, or how they can utilize testers to potential for benefit of the project team. And that made me wonder, and I asked myself, yes, this is something that we all need to discuss, we all need to think about, and for industry at large, this is the question we need to answer. What usually happens is, whenever there are new methodologies coming in, technological changes happening, all these context changing drivers that are taking place, things for programmers at large are pretty obvious. They pretty much know what is expected of them with this changing context. But most of the times, we testers are left to fit in, figure out our own game. And that's where new things come out. Okay, DevOps testing, testers should be doing this, use this tool, do that, do that, do that, do that. But why does it happen that testers are made to figure out, and why there is nothing that concretely tells testers, this is your place in this scenario, and this is what we expect of you? And this is a wake-up call, in my opinion, for all of us and also industry, to think about testing beyond testing as just something that is there to find bugs, write test scripts, and be done with it. And which is why I would like to know, or rather ask all of you, which is what I asked myself too. Why do we need testers? Feel free to unmute yourself and answer me, because I'm not able to see the chat right now. I would rather like to have a discussion with you. Feel free to interrupt me anytime if you have a question. If you want to understand something or challenge the idea, I'm pretty open for having conversations right then and there.
Hi Lalit, it's Sharon here.
Hey Sharon, hi.
Hi, lovely to see you again since the Test Drive conference. I think one of the reasons we need testers is because testers have a testing mindset, a critical mindset, and the developers have a bias towards a builder's mindset. Mm-hmm. So they want to verify that what they've built works the way they expected it. You need a different mindset to be able to find the problems in a product.
Absolutely, absolutely. What else do you think testers are needed for? Or someone else, if you want to answer, please feel free to join the discussion.
Hi Lalit, Bikram here.
Hi.
We can find the risk of the product which can be harmful for the end user.
Mm-hmm. And?
So that way we can help, so that way the testers come into the picture. So they know the end users, how the user is going to use the product, or how the product is going to behave, so that it should be working without harmful, and the product is safe and kind of can be used very well.
All right. Thank you so much for interesting answers. I would ask you to kindly mute yourself, and we will move on with the next. Suresh, you raised your hand. Please be quick. Are you there, Suresh? Okay, I will move on. Well, we will come back to that answer later, but this is what I call formal opening of my talk, and I would like to cite this poem for you. Turning and turning in the winding gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold, mere anarchy is loosened upon the world. It's a beautiful poem. This is the stanza from The Second Coming by William Yeats, and James Buck referred to me this poem when we were discussing system collapse. And somehow I feel we testers in our day-to-day life, or our project teams more or less in our day-to-day life, once in a while we come up and end up in these situations where everything is falling off, things are beyond control, and people cannot figure out what is happening. And I experience these things happening, especially when the testering team suddenly disappears. Imagine you are part of a typical agile team where you are the only tester in your team, and for some reason you are not there. You fell sick, you had some emergency, something happened, and you are suddenly out of the scene. What usually happens when a tester in a team suddenly disappears? Do you have any interesting stories to share with me? Anyone? Come on, there must be a chaos, I'm very sure.
So yeah, myself Vinod. So there will be I mean, if a QA disappear in the within the development stage, either the commitments will be carried over to, I mean, the commitments will be carried over to next release, I mean, next sprints or whatever it. So, and the second thing, the if a team have a two QAs and one disappears and the other one will be overloaded with the testing activity.
Gets impacted. Any other answer? Thank you, Vinod. Any other interesting story? Mahesh, I'm sure you have lots of inside the room stories to share when the testers suddenly disappear and you had to take all the heat.
Vikram, you have your hand raised. Vikram, do you want to go? Vikram?
Maybe he is on mute. Vikram, you need to unmute yourself. Okay, let's move on with Naveen. All right. Mahesh, do you have any interesting story to share?
I did come across from my side, it normally happens that during the testers normally are pushed towards the end, when there is a critical situation. When it comes to testing, we are normally expected to work during weekends. So it is really very chaotic to find a tester to test during the weekend. So that becomes really very difficult to find a tester at the last moment to squeeze in and get all of the critical tests done and assure that uh, we get the product released on time. So normally it becomes a really very difficult activity to manage when you don't have the right tester at the right time to meet the deadline. So that becomes really very tough for me.
Cool. Yeah. So in a way, your system delivery, product delivery got impacted. Things
Right.
got piled up, and it somehow resulted in many other things.
So I have one story
interviewed.
to tell. Sorry.
Go ahead. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So in my previous project, we had a very stable application. I mean, hardly one or two bugs came in, when we released. But one time major release happened, and since management believes that this is very stable application, so they did risk-based testing, and that was insurance-based application. So one bug got missed out, which lead to be loss of thousands of dollars to the company. So the bug was they missed the date format actually.
Nice.
Yep. So it was actually it should be MMDDYYY, and it was DDMMYYY. Since they did very limited risk-based testing, so that is the reason they missed out this bug. That was long back actually.
Yeah, that time we did not have this meme of what is your favorite date format. Anyway, thank you for very interesting answers. I interviewed my colleagues over the years. I talked with developers from my team and past teams. I discussed this situation with my colleagues in industry, and this is what I have finally come up with. So when a tester in a team suddenly disappears, what happens essentially and eventually, in my experience, is our system that we operate into gets disrupted. So I understood this concept of system from Jay Weinberg's book, How Software is Built. Lots of interesting stuff there. If you are more curious to learn about feedback and control and how systems gets into collapse mode, please do yourself a favor and read it. The reason why I'm bringing this up here is because I feel as a testers, we are not just only testing the product, but we are basically assessing the system we operate into. More on that later. But as per my understanding, experience, and also interviewing colleagues in the industry, I realized that when testers in a team suddenly disappear, teams suffer with different challenges like uncertainty. They don't know where was the testing left, where they could take over from, what was the handover supposed to be there. There is confusion. There are impacted deployments. If you're participating in deployments, they're getting impacted. Things are getting piled up. Uh, Broken tests are supposed to be fixed, but there is nobody to fix them. More automated checks were supposed to be added. Nobody was there to add that. Test data creation was impacted. Missing risk assessment happened. Pending bug investigation. Lots of things. And what usually happens is when all these shortcomings are there in the project, they result in a loop. All you can see here, these things are interrelated. One issue leads to another one. They keep feeding each other back, and this in a way results in a very poor or degraded feedback to our system controller, which basically is our team lead or PO or whoever gets to control the project delivery. And this degraded feedback results in an impaired control. Since they do not get the feedback they would need to control the system properly and protect itself from the collapse, they don't get it, and eventually this leads to a system collapse, a disrupted system. And when I was discussing this with Michael Bolton, he made a very important statement, and I would quote him here. These loops that we are seeing here of this technical deck from a simple shortfall can quickly result into an economical collapse, and this is not the situation we would like to end up. So dear testers, this is what I want you to understand. When you are suddenly not available in your team, it is not just the testing that is getting impacted. It is not just couple of scenarios that is getting missed. It's not just some bugs that are appearing in production. But I want you to understand that your role and the contribution you make in your team is so powerful, so important, so valuable that your absence and your poor performance can result in a system collapse. And this is why I want you to understand your true potential. Let's now try to understand why I'm saying that you are so powerful as a tester. And the answer lies in our understanding of what testing is. Can just one of you really quickly tell me what testing is for you? And please tell me something beyond finding bugs, assessing risks. I'm really looking for a very interesting answer here.
Uh, Hi Lalit, Yogesh here.
Hi,
Like testing is something like checking the correctness of the whole system, whether it's
Mhm.
giving the result or not, checking the completeness of the whole system, where we have to check each and every functionality in the tape, whether it is fulfilling the business need or not. Or testing is something like checking the security level of the application, whether we have to test whether right data is appear to the displayed at the right location to the right person as per the rule and all. Okay, so this checking testing is
Well,
something.
sorry to interrupt, Yogesh, but since you're mentioning checking so much, all these checks are typically, usually very easy to automate. Why should I need you as a tester if I can automate this all? And Priyanka already told us about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all these awesome tools. So why should I need a human tester in my team anymore?
So, hi Lalit, Vinod here. So, in my opinion, so a tool cannot assess the risk. I mean, human can assess the risk. So,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
via in the functionality, in terms of functionality, so
mm-hmm,
a human can assess the risk. A tool cannot.
mm-hmm.
So, this is why we need a human in
Okay.
testing.
So risk assessment, very interesting answer. I mean, thank you both of you. You gave really interesting answers. I'm
Lalit,
still trying to
Suresh
figure
here. For me, testing is no, to provide feedback
Mm-hmm,
and to assess and no, not assess, identify the risks and expose them for further discussion and
mm-hmm,
no, mitigate to get better user experience,
mm-hmm.
resulting in good business and revenues.
Great, great, great. Lots of interesting answer. Naveen, I will let
Okay,
you answer that.
so
Mm-hmm.
Hi Lalit, are you able to hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Like in testing, we are going to release a reliable product to the market. Maybe if we are testing an airplane, so we are not going to depend on the developer when we are releasing the software of the airplane or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very critical activity.
Sure.
okay, so Lalit Jatin here. So development is something which make product, and testing is something which make that product better.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If you say
Hi,
so,
Lalit.
oh yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
please.
what testing means is like we use our testers look like from the end user perspective. So
Mm-hmm.
when testing, we think about the business end users, how the operations, how the users are going to use. So we think on that particular aspect and we try to test that particular thing in the product. So that end user will not face any criticality in the project, in the product. So this is what I feel the testing is, what the tester does.
Thank you. Thanks for very interesting answers, people. And I would now tell you what I think testing really is. For me, and the philosophy of testing that I believe in, testing is an empirical investigation between the product system and the people and the relationship between them. So when I'm testing a product, I'm really not testing only the product. I'm working with people, I'm working with the infrastructure, I'm working in a project, I'm working in a system, I'm interacting with people from different disciplines, and my ability to investigate empirically all these things and together with the relationship between them, the dynamics between them, the interdependence of them, how they communicate with each other, this whole thing helps me understand the perceived quality of the software that I'm testing. And when I say that, this is all about primarily finding information. By interacting with all these things, by assessing this product system, people, and the interactions between them, we as a tester find information on primary basis, and we give this information to our stakeholders so that they can make an informed decision based on that. Nowadays, testers are also taking additional things in their hand, which I appreciate. I personally try to fix bugs, not just find them. If I can fix them, I do fix them. If I cannot fix them, I ask the expert and involve them in fixing process. Lots of things, but primarily we are still finding the information. And I really want you to understand this notion of testing or this understanding of testing, because this is where your true potential as a tester is hiding. This is where you can figure out how important you are for the project team, for the system you're operating into, because you are not just focusing on product. You think you are, but it is very, very, very unlikely that a tester is focusing only on testing the product unless you are not interacting with anyone else other than the product. But if you're working in a team, working on a project, interacting with people, then understand that through your testing, you are doing more beyond just testing the product. And which is why your role as a tester becomes very critical, very important, and very powerful. because we as a testers don't just study and assess the product in a way. We are assessing the system we are operating into. And this is why I think there are a lot many things we as a testers could do beyond simply writing checks and automating them or finding bugs. What are these things? We will talk about that in a bit, but I think there is a problem. And when I started analyzing state of testing report every year together with Joel, we realized there are, based on some findings, I could figure out there are problems lying in some areas, and these are something that I are my personal interpretation. You could disagree, but what happens is with the advancements and more adoption to agile and DevOps, more and more and more testing teams or testers are reporting to development or engineering leadership. Nothing against any of them. I have worked with a great engineers. I'm still working with great engineers who are my bosses. But the thing is, usually most of the people in a leadership role or manager role who are these days responsible for testers, they are not from the testing background. So they do not know what real testing means. More at the max, or in majority of them are more aware with automation in testing and technical things, which is where they try to assess testers for. And this is creating a sheer imbalance in our industry. I think this is dragging us in a bigger problem, and I will tell you why. Here are some artifacts, some statistics that I could pull from state of testing report for last year, I guess. I'm yet to check the latest one for these things, but you could see that the trend is more shifting towards testers reporting to their program managers or engineering leads, and who are typically not from testing background. You could also see, if you look at the task that testers in organizations are typically doing, majority of the task is only about writing scripts and automating. This concerns me. If you understood the tester's role or the power that we just discussed, how they can influence and impact the entire system and not just the product, then investing and writing only automation is such a small part of what tester can really do. I'm not saying automation is not important. It is important, it is useful, and it will actually free you from doing a mundane, repeated, boring task, so to say, and it will free you up to do the real meaningful work that you are expected to do as a tester. Unfortunately, what currently is happening and where I see testers getting driven a lot is only running behind automation. If you don't know automation, please do yourself a favor and learn it, get good at it, but don't just get stuck at it, because this is where you're compromising with your true value, with your true potential, and you're blocking yourself from contributing more to the project team. Please don't do that. And this whole system, this whole situation, the way I see it, is creating and dragging us into a bigger problem. We are giving too much importance for things which are just very small portion of what we could do. And this is affecting our overall ability to ship quality software faster and frequently. Your automation is going to give you a faster feedback for something that you already know of, but it is very unlikely that it is going to uncover hidden risks for you. This is where your contribution matters. And you don't find risk just by testing the product. You find risk by testing the system. You also find risk by assessing the people around you and assessing the whole relationship between people, product, and the processes. That said, what we could really do to change this, what is it that is still possible beyond writing automation, writing automated checks, writing scripts, and finding bugs? What is it that we testers can do? So Lalit, tell us, what are you talking about, this true potential? So These are certain things that I personally try to do. This is something that I personally ask people to do. I have found these things to be creating an impact, and this is what I'm sharing with you now. Maybe you can find out something more for your own based on understanding the context around you. Feel free to write about it, share it further, and let's try to make our testing world more beautiful, more useful beyond simply writing automation and finding bugs. This is my answer. This is the question that I'm going to answer now in coming slides. How can we become significant part of a system itself? And the first and foremost thing I would ask you to do is start advocating testability. Testability is such a less discussed topic in my opinion in our industry, which really needs lots of attention, investment, which is why I have started this pilot project with our colleagues from DITCraft that I'm on advisory panel, and they are investigating more on how we could come up with something more useful in testability space. If you are not aware of testability, please make yourself familiar. James Park has a very beautiful uh, document written on heuristics for software testability. Please read it. There are lots of ways you can find about testability. There is epistemic testability, value related testability, intrinsic testability, something I would insist you to focus on. C for observability, controllability, smallness, unbugginess. There are lots of factors that make your life easy and make the software more testable. If your product is not observable enough, your efforts in testing are probably not going to be useful. If you are not able to better control the product you are testing, probably you cannot test much meaningfully. I would recommend understand testability for yourself and see what it means in your project context. Start pairing with programmers and ask them to improve quality. Be their advocate and make recommendations. Once in a while, I'm pairing with my programmers and I'm doing testing for testability sessions with them. Sometimes I'm pairing with my testing colleagues. We are going through the code, pull request, and checking where we can improve testability. There are lots of ways. Ask them to give proper identifiers which are easy to read, which can also be helpful for improving accessibility of your code and the labels. These identifiers will be easy for you for automating early enough in the process. In the beginning, in the past, I spent lots of time on only finding a suitable identifier so I can make progress with my automated check. That was such a waste of time. If right from the beginning, if you're pairing with your programmer colleagues and asking them to improve on testability side, this is a big favor you're doing yourself. Sit with them, discuss solutions. There are lots of ways you could challenge technical solutions and make it more testable. I remember of having situations where when there were user complaints from production, it was so difficult to find out and analyze the problem that was there. I as a tester understood certain situations and I proposed to implement some technical solutions. I asked them to send some metadata when we were sending contract information when the contracts was getting created. This information was nothing useful for user. This was not going anywhere, but it was just lying sitting in our system. But whenever we had a problem, whenever we had to identify situation that were going haywire, whenever we had to find out and analyze the bugs, this metadata saved us a lot of time of investigating. And this is how we save so much of time in further bugs and analyzing the problems.
Ah,
It is, yeah, is anybody asking something? I guess not. So please understand testability, understand what it means in your project context, and start advocating your project teams for improving on testability. The sooner you start, the better it is. There are lots of ways you could improve on observability. Sometimes very stupid error messages, they don't tell anything. They are a waste of time for me. If the error message says, sorry, something went wrong, I'm sorry, but this is not helping me to investigate the problem. But if your error message is telling you something that was supposed to be, something that was mandatory is missing, then that helps your investigation further easier. Give this feedback to your developers, sit with them, see if you can implement some monitoring systems in place that can help you identify and see the logs, what is happening. Create some dashboards in place and see how observable you can make your product, which will help you for testing. This is my number one advice if you want to contribute beyond typical bug finding and writing checks and really making a meaningful contribution to your project team. Be a testability advocate. Do we have any questions here? All right, I will move on to the next idea. Another powerful thing. Please collaborate with your UX colleague. This is something I personally did and it made wonders for me. And this is very, very, very useful if you do it early in the process when the designers are designing your solutions. I did some experiments and I have written a heuristic, or rather say the entire process of implementing this quality expense thing. I call it QX. Basically, it's a conceptual marriage between QA and UX, which is why, excuse me, which helps you co-create a quality experience for the user. Feel free to search on the Google or at the end of the talk, I think I have the link for it, of how I implemented this idea of QX right from the beginning, what process changes we did, what were the benefits, and how testers can contribute to this whole engagement. The benefit here is we testers think more from system point of view. Our thinking is more system thinking. And the way I understand designers think, they're from the design thinking mindset. Imagine what will happen when system thinking and design thinking come together. Yes, there will be clashes, but there will be a lots of interesting things that you will come across. When I was pairing with my UX colleagues, when I pair with them once in a while, I have a technical information as a tester. I have the awareness of known challenges, interface related problems, difficulties of particular solution, why it would not work with particular team. I have the more awareness about what some other team we are interacting with is going to change and how it is going to impact the solution the designer is working on. Usually when designers are working, they are focused on solving particular problem. They typically usually do not have the whole idea of the system, which is where we testers can help them. We can give them this system view of how this solution is going to impact or get impacted when it is put in place. Help them understand about technical challenges, why it cannot happen. Very often it happened that when a designer came up with a solution for solving problem in one way, we as an engineering team and I as a tester gave them 10 ways why it was not feasible, practical, or going to succeed because of XYZ challenges. And similarly, pairing with UX people can also help you identify what scenarios that you are working on really make difference. If you're wasting, or rather say, if you're investing so much time on testing XYZ thing, but if only very minor fraction of users are going to be affected by that, or probably nobody is going to even come across that particular feature, it is waste of time and energy for that particular time. Interacting with UX people and the information I got from them has always helped me strategize, prioritize, and risk analyze the scenarios and my testing accordingly. And that helped me stay focused and do relevant testing for that part of time. Ask them what kind of devices users are using, what you should be focusing on. When you're doing mobile testing, your device fragmentation plays very important role. You need to know which device, what screen size is very important at this particular point of time, which you can use to strategize your testing for. You cannot test everything at every time. So please do yourself a favor, start collaborating with UX people. It's a very powerful collaboration. Help them with your understanding of system, help them create solutions that are more practical, more easy to implement, and borrow their ideas to strategize your testing and make it more time relevant, more context relevant, and more useful for that time being, I would say. Next thing I would recommend you to do is advocating for product coverage. I believe most of the testers are now pairing with programmers typically in their context. Some of them are writing test cases in advance, which testers are writing, and programmers are implementing those. Like also, shared uh, that her testing team is writing behavior-driven tests in place, and developers are then later automating those. These things definitely help, but there is a lot more you can do beyond that. How I do in my project context is whenever we are having a user stories in place for our typical grooming sessions, together with my another testing colleague, and also most of the times by pairing with developer, we are doing coverage analysis, or let's say SFDI POT analysis of that user request, of that user story. So SFDI POT is a heuristic from heuristic test strategy model by James Bach, typically meant for product coverage, which I'm implementing for solving different things in my project context. I'm pairing with programmers to technique for technical grooming of our user stories using SFDI POT framework. It helps us to identify so many problems even before developer starts writing his code or implement his solution. On number of occasions, we have identified dependencies with the backend, dependencies with another interfaces, and that knowledge, questioning the system, questioning our existing context using this checklist helped us figure out so much useful information that actually helped us to design the solution in such a way that we avoided lots of potential problems we could eventually find through either testing or through accidents. Testing doesn't always mean finding bugs when we are doing execution of our checks or tests. No, you can still test and find out the risk and find out potential problems if you know how to do it. And one of the very powerful way I have experienced is using PCO sessions. Typically in session-based testing context, it is product coverage outline that you create for guiding your testing further. I use it with the reference of creating this product coverage outline when we are creating engineering solutions with our developer. The same outline later helps us and also the developers to think of different scenarios they would need for testing. This thing is so powerful, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of this exercise. Please start doing it for yourself. Whenever there are user stories in place, start analyzing the user story using SFDR POT. Ask POs questions, ask them important questions. You will uncover lots of things that I'm sure they have not thought of. Sit with the programmer and discuss the same checklist and try to find out answers, especially on the interfaces side, data side. Uh, Another constraints would be on the function side and time side. That is going to uncover so much of useful information that half of your problems are likely to get solved just with that. You will do yourself a big favor by avoiding lots of potential mistakes which happen just because the information was not there at that point of time. But when you get this information well in advance, chances of making stupid mistakes or obvious mistakes are very less. Imagine how much time, resources, money you are saving by avoiding to do the mistakes. The cost of finding and fixing things later in the process is super high. So please, please, please try it for yourself. This is very powerful. I have found it very useful. Could you please put yourself on mute? So that is my recommendation for advocating product coverage. Try to use SFDRT for solving your different testing challenges, especially on the coverage side. Another thing I would insist, please start participating deployments and start doing production telemetry. If you're not doing it already, I recommend you to do that. I learned a lot when I took ownership of doing deployments. It helped me understand the infrastructure so well. It helped me understand where the code is going wrong, where the deployments are stuck, what is exactly happening when our code is getting deployed to production. Because when we find bugs, they are not all the time going to be functional bugs. The bugs could also be because of the system architecture we have in place or the infrastructure that we have in place. If you're building a product and if you're not able to ship it on time, probably all the efforts of building that quality product which you couldn't ship are gone wasted. Deploying or participating in deployments helped me pair with programmers on a very different level. It helped me understand their language. It helped me understand what are different engineering metrics that also matter. Start doing this, you will learn the programmer's language. Pairing with programmer is a very powerful thing, especially if you do it for bug investigation and also for deployments. I would rather say start taking ownership for your deployments. You are going to learn a lot. And that knowledge is going to help you to do your own job better, to be more valuable in your project team, and to be more useful to your system beyond just writing test cases. Other thing is doing monitoring. If you are still not checking your production logs or learning from your production uh, system, please start doing this. Once in a while, I do check our production logs and see what is currently going on. Make a habit of checking your production logs, maybe at least once a day or at least once, twice a day. I experienced that lots of critical scenarios, use cases that were very difficult for me to imagine. I could learn about those from these production failures and the logs that I saw. Most of my very important test cases, very critical findings are or have been based on my learning of our users and their behaviors and the common failure patterns or critical complex situations that happen with the user side by learning about those in the production logs. Production monitoring is a very powerful tool for you as a tester. You will learn a lot about the system. You will learn a lot about what kind of things are happening on the user end side. Please start doing that. It is a very important field. I would recommend you to learn about, invest, and be more useful for your project team. And more importantly, this understanding, this technical understanding and experience will help a lot for having improved communication and collaboration and pairing session with your developers. It is important for successful pairing with the devs that you speak their language, you understand their terminologies, you understand their context, and they do the same. And to do your bit, I recommend you to get your hands dirty with all these technical things. So you understand things better, you understand terminologies better, you understand context better, which in a way helps you to communicate better and understand better when you are engaging in any kind of collaboration exercise, pairing exercise with the developers. These are more of a source of information and making yourself familiar with lots of things. And I really can't emphasize enough on production telemetry and also deployments. If you are familiar with Jenkins, try configuring the Jenkins jobs yourself. It's not rocket science. Most of the tools are very intuitive. It's all about you wanting to do it. I have set up deployment pipelines for my project and I learned a lot throughout this process. And I recommend you to do the same. Another powerful thing that I did and I found useful was pairing with the marketing team and the user care team. When we are in a constant pressure of delivering new features, it also means you're also getting user complaints once in a while, and having better understanding of what your users are expecting, the way they are using system, what are their common problems, what are the repeating problems, the whole understanding of user, their personas, their way of using things, their concerns, complaints. This is a very powerful tool for you to figure out what matters more. This is a very powerful information for you to prioritize your testing, to prioritize your risk list, to strategize your testing. Communicating with users, if you could do that, it's really powerful. But if you cannot directly communicate with your users, I recommend you to at least start having regular sessions with your user care team. The way I did it was we started creating user documentation and guides. uh, Writing typically the FAQs also helps. Most of the times you as a tester have lots of insights into what are going to be a typical questions from the users and what are the answers for them. You can help write user guides, you can help write frequently asked questions in a way that it will be easy for user care team to communicate better when there are user complaints. Most of the times I realized user care was coming up with questions or defects or user complaints which were repeating, which were known issues, which were already addressed in past, or which could be easily analyzed from their end if they had little understanding of some technical understanding of things. I did an experiment and I educated some of my user care people back in past. I showed them some technical hacks, how to find some information which is not easily available on their user care portal, so to say, how to find out how things are related to each other. So if the user care people are able to analyze the problems, they are also better able to explain the problem to the user and make a decision. Sometimes user care needs to make a counter offer to keep angry customer happy. And sometimes if the problem is not big, but if just the user is making it big, user care ends up making big offers which were unnecessary in some cases. If they have an understanding of how things work from behind the scenes, if you create some technical hacks from them or easy to do things for them, you can save a lot of time for your own team from getting into unnecessary analysis of the complaints, which could be easily done at user care hand itself. So all in all, pairing with user care and marketing has helped me create the information flow back and forth. I learned things from them. I could understand very important and critical situations which were very complex scenarios and which were not easy for us to imagine of. So we create contracts for systems, and sometimes user care has rights to make particular offers to the users for whatever reasons. And these offerings made, which are not standard offerings made by software or a typical program, these all these operations, these things result in a complicated user states, which creates problems for making further sales, giving them further offers. It impacts the business logic that we have in our code. It creates conflicting situations. It creates special situations. And this is the fastest way to learn about all these complications and these possibilities. Ask user care and ask them what are the very common user complaints coming, what are the typical situations that they are often ending with. Find out if there are any exclusive and very specific user states that are very unlikely to be created by straightforward use of your software. Understand this and try to bring this knowledge back and see how you can use it to make your life easy. I created an FAQ within our team that our user care could refer to. If this is complaint from user, most likely this is the problem. Before raising a ticket for us to investigate and analyze, which takes up lots of time of our planning, grooming, and typical feature shaping things. Create these documents for them so they can refer to this document themselves and save you from lots of investigation. Ask them for the information I just asked you for, and I promise you will most certainly find out lots of interesting things which probably your production logs won't tell you, probably your business analyst won't tell you, unless there is a shitstorm going on, and probably you would never be able to predict. Make your marketing people your friends. Ask marketing people how they are targeting their ads. When we were developing an application for tracking system or when we were creating a tracking solution, understanding what tools our marketing team is using, understanding how that tool is doing automation of marketing, understanding what parameters this tool uses, This information helped me a lot to strategize my testing and create integration tests and do end-to-end testing. Because even marketing teams are using different tools which are not part of our delivery scope. But how our system is interacting with these tools also matters for whole marketing campaign. The better you understand their tools, their systems, the better you'll be understand how you are serving them and how better you can serve their needs. Try to gather this information and make most of it. I'm sure this way you are going to be way more valuable to your project team than, yes, writing automation and checks. And these were the things that I have personally tried and experimented with, which I'm finding very useful. Couple of other things are try to be a quality advocate rather than quality assurance tester. Pair with as much people as you can, pair with different disciplines, conduct testing sessions, educate people about testing. The more they understand you, the better it will be for you to sell your craft. And one of the most important things that I did, which was kind of unobvious for me, but I realized that if testers are conscious and if they put an effort in developing this skill, they can be way more valuable than simply talking about quality. And here I'm talking about becoming a support system of your system controller. What I mean by that, you as a tester are endowed with a sharp observation skills. If somebody asks me what is my biggest power as a tester, I would say my power to observe and analyze and draw inferences from that. Jerry Weinberg, in his books How Software is Built, talks about feedback effects. And the system theory or the system collapse theory I explained in the beginning of my talk is very much related to these feedback effects. I would say use your power of observation and use it to your advantage of protecting your system from collapse. Jerry Weinberg advises to act early and act small as one of the way to keep your system protected from the collapse. What it really means, to act early, it is important that you sharpen your power of observation. And to act small, you also need to sharpen your understanding of observing subtleties of human behavior. I, as a tester, have personally found myself to be very sharp in this. I observe things around me. I observe people. I observe their strengths and weaknesses. I observe how they are interacting with each other. I observe their relations and rapports. And this information, as somebody who is part of the system, helps me to strategize my testing. It helps me to find out the project related risk, which could affect the quality. One example would be after spending enough time with one of the programmer back in past while doing pairing session with him, I realized that he was particularly weak in XYZ area. He did not have enough business understanding or knowledge about that, and he lacked necessary skills to solve that particular problem. And whenever there were requests coming from for testing from that particular developer, I already knew where I should look for the problems. Majority of the times, the problems I found in his code were from this particular part of the application, because with my experience and knowledge and my interaction with him, I knew that he is likely to make mistakes in this part of the process. That helped me strategize my testing. That helped me find out where are the risks hiding, which are unlikely to be found with lots of efforts otherwise. You can start observing the people and the system around you. See what other teams are doing, see what cross-functional teams are planning. Try to figure out what challenges your cross-function teams are currently facing. We have usual tester exchange in our company where we keep on sharing information about status of our project, what we are doing, what our challenges are. And this information is good enough for me to figure out what it means for my project. Sometimes Our bosses, our POs, and our developers are probably unaware of these things, and you can use this information to feed them so that they can take an informed decision about what they should do next. As a tester, you are in a perfect position and a very powerful position to make these observations and bridge this gap and protect your system from collapse. It makes no sense. I remember of a very, very horrible experience back in past where our very critical business rollout was dependent on some of the development to be done by cross-functional team, and they could not deliver on time. There were some challenges. Should we have known this possible failure coming from their side for whatever challenges it could not happen, we could have planned our launch properly. And I believe if testers from different disciplines or teams talk to each other, they are a very good proxy for helping their respective systems from collapsing. I would say if you are not doing this, please start using this thing and see this thing as a skill. Your observation, your power of observation, don't use it just for observing your software. Don't use it just for finding bugs, but extend this ability and your sharp observation skills to the people around you, system around you. See the relationships and dynamics between them. See who is good in XYZ thing and how you can utilize that person's expertise to solve your problems, for example. Appreciate people. Go and talk to your boss and tell them what you appreciate of. This information, this hidden thing that you found out based on your sharp observation, maybe that will help your boss for making further strategic decisions. If you see risk in, if you see somebody doesn't get along with XYZ way of doing things, you can raise this as a risk. So the person who is responsible for your strategy of the project can use this information to avoid that risk in place. Please, I would again insist on this thing. Your power of observation as a tester is the very powerful tool that you have as a tester, which is very difficult for any other discipline to just adopt. This observation skill and the inferences drawing skill based on those observations, drawing conclusion, comes with lots of experience, attentiveness. This is with tester based on their lots of experience and passion. Use this skill, use this power for doing more meaningful things, doing extra things beyond just finding the bugs. I have benefited a lot by being this person in my system where I use my observation skills to protect the system from collapse in variety of ways, not just by finding bugs. The risk is not always in the product. It could also be with the system you're operating in. It could also be in the project planning. It could also be in the strategy. You'll never know. And you as a tester are better placed to observe these, analyze them, draw conclusions, and raise red flags if it is important, or at least give this information to your system controller. They will thank you. They will most certainly appreciate that. And moving on to what skills can help contribute you beyond traditional role. I think there was a question also asked, and this is something I'm often asked when I'm doing this talk. This is something I asked myself too. And guess what? I found a very powerful talk that was made by Fiona Charles in European Testing Conference. She did an amazing talk on multiplying the odds, which focuses more on the skills that testers can have and develop further to be more significant, more useful. I would say beyond programming skills and technical skills or testing skills, please invest on cognitive skills. There are lots of things. Practice system thinking. Try, I particularly ask my people, and I also try to do that, to is to improve our interactional expertise. You should be able to communicate value of your testing to somebody who doesn't understand testing. Practice communicating testing to different people in a language they understand. If you're not able to explain the problem you have found to your CEO in a way that he can make sense out of it, probably your finding is wasted. If you cannot explain your finding to a programmer who is supposed to fix that bug in a way who can understand it, he can understand it, probably you're going to have problem. Just finding information is not enough. Knowing how to communicate that information, that risk effectively is extremely important in my opinion. If you check state of testing survey, communication is consistently on top of the skills that testers find or industry finds most important for the testers. So good if you are good in programming skills, good for you if you're good in testing skills, but if you're not able to communicate effectively, you're going to have hard time. I would recommend you to read Tacit and Explicit Knowledge by Harry Collins. And please, please, please do not forget, read How to Talk About Testing by James Buck. This 12-page document is really going to make wonders for you, and it is going to make you aware of lots of things which you're apparently currently facing or have faced in past. Do yourself a favor, please read this document. Knowing about how to talk about testing and reading all the explanations made by James, revelations made by James, there, his take on bunch of things that are currently happening, that helped me a lot in my personal challenges when I had to talk about testing to difficult people. Your business knowledge and skills are important. Your experience definitely matters. Your character, if you're brave, if you're courageous, if you're empathetic, these things do matter. What kind of role you have in system? Are you a manager? Are you just an analyst? Are you a quality advocate? Are you a generalist? Are you a specialist? All these things make a big difference. So please, please, once again, educate yourself for your true potential. You are not meant to be only automating things, writing checks. There is a lot more you can do. And this is what I would say. Once again, this is, I keep telling myself that as a tester, we don't just study and assess only the product we work with, but in a way, we are studying and assessing the whole system we operate into. And it is very powerful thing. Never forget that. And with that, I would like to share these resources with you. Please, as I mentioned, do not miss reading How to Talk About Testing by James Buck. Just Google it, you will find it on his website. Multiplying the Odds by Fiona Charles. If you are interested in knowing more about how to drive this quality experience engagement with your UX people, I wrote a blog, detailed blog on it, talking about the process, the heuristic for testers and stuff. It is on my website. It is also on LinkedIn. If you are more interested about design thinking, Jerry Wenberg wrote a very interesting book that also helped me, System Design Heuristic. Read that book. There is more you can do just beyond testing. I wrote an article on with Sticky Minds about whole team testing, how you can use testing education for driving whole team quality. I also offer workshops. If you're interested, we can talk about it. All the pictures you saw in my talk are from Unsplash. And I would like to thank Mahesh, the Test Tribe, SQA webinars for promoting this webinar, and Astrid, my colleague, for reviewing my presentation, and she forced me to change lots of things to make it more interesting. With that, people, I'm done with my talk, and if you have questions, we can now discuss.
Thank you,
And
Lalit.
most importantly, thank you so much to all of you for tolerating me and my rant.